Okay, apologies. By accident, I just hit the button. So I just wanted to say, this peak here, the tall one, is at 560, and I measured that as soon as I bought the measuring device. So this is this thing, and it was basically being, radiated into my home. But it was a standalone peak, and there was nothing here, and then as here, there was always the mobile phone signal. So this is the GSM 900 marked down there, this white little box, and it's in this line. It's anything, sorry, in this line here, there. So that's the mobile phone signal, and you can see how high the mobile phone signal here is, and you can see that this stuff typically is higher. So mobile phone signal roughly here, between these two lines. So if I go over here, that's minus 70 and minus 65. But this stuff goes all the way to minus 55 dBm. So you can see that this structure, overall, in this region, is even more intense than the mobile phone signal. So it seems to be the case that something is being broadcast into my home that is much more intense. And here in the software you can see the readout. It's now plotting 350 megahertz to 900 megahertz. Okay? Here. And you can just see that. And according to Dr. Paul Baccio, as he's quoted, anything between this line, 400 megahertz, this fine line here, and this line, 700 megahertz. So everything in the area from here to here, all of this, the certified measurement constitutes an act of terrorism. Okay, so here at home, I am suffering from an act of terrorism with the technology that the military and the intelligence agencies have got access to. So it could, of course, be the case that sorry, I just put these books here. Oh yes, and you can check that I'm saying the truth. Ironically, these are books on law, but they are actually, I think here it says St. John's College Library, Oxford. And before you think I've stole a book, I can also show you that these books were stamped withdrawn from the library. They were throwing them out. And then I picked them up because I thought, actually, having these books on law, if they're throwing them out, might be quite handy. Just, might not be 100% up to date, but still ballpark. And this is, I think, by Paul Craig, one of the fellows at St. John's, who's an expert on EU law. So anyway, so you can tell that I'm saying the truth, and I really was a fellow at St. John's College because I managed to get hold of the library books that they just happened to be, throwing out and withdrawing from the library. But what I wanted to say is that yes, I am being, shot at in my home with pulsed frequencies. It's an act of terrorism. It's being also, the actual, peak goes now up the 560 to minus 43 dBm. So it's a significant peak here, And yes, it could be the case that, I just happen to be just out of pure chance, I'm being irradiated here with these frequencies. So I've just realized that it's interesting because it kind of changes what they do. And for a long time, there was just a standalone peak like that. The big one is the 560. And yeah, you can say, oh, it looks like an obelisk, oh, Freemasons and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, it looks like it. But the point is that this 560 was being broadcast into my home non-stop. And then there didn't used to be anything here, either side of it. And now, after my third hearing, I think, this thing just started up, the brain interference frequencies. And it's ironic because the night before my third hearing, so MI5 always is put on like, I'll put this down because it's distracting. Intimidation or mocking theater. And what they did before my third hearing is I went for a walk and my mobile phone battery was flat, so I didn't actually take my mobile phone, sadly. But then, and they can also tell when I have my mobile phone on me and when not. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. So I just went for a walk. I flew to London. It was the night before my third hearing. I was really exhausted and I wanted to go to bed, and I thought, no, let's just go for a walk and, just enjoy it. So I walked down to Trafalgar Square, and then I did a walk down towards St. James's Square, just to, kind of calm down and clear my head. And then as I was just behind St. James's Square, where the antique dealers are, MI5 put on a spectacle. So they do that all the time. They just love to jeer about your suffering and, just tell you what they're going to do to you next. That's also one of the things that MI5 does, and it must derive from what we now know about satanic rituals and their belief in bad karma. And if they tell you ahead of the time, then by the time they do it to you, it's not really their fault. I mean, this is the sort of absolute whacked out bullshit that I couldn't have believed before my harassment started, but now, based on what I have seen, it tallies 100% with what all people who complain about child sexual abuse have reported. That yes, this is exactly the sort of esoteric or basically just bullcrap. It's not even like a religion. It's just bullcrap. It's brainwash. But that's the brainwash that they seem to imbue their staff in. These satanic rituals and telling your victims ahead of the time what you're going to do. And the night before my third hearing, before Judge Holgate, what they did is on my walk just behind St. James's Square, there's the bit with the antique dealers. So there's a guy who's selling like medieval armory and then paintings and, I think coins and antique books. And there's a little street that goes down from this street, just, behind St. James's Square and towards the Economist offices. And there's on the corner one which is selling cufflinks. And I was just walking down that street. And then they put on a guy who was coming around the corner on a bike and, swerving left and right, a big guy, trying to catch my attention desperately as he was, cycling towards me. And then he was also wearing military uniform with camouflage. I mean, the people of London have seen it all, so that in itself is not unusual. But he was in full, camouflage, and it had a German flag here. Interestingly, not here. It was right here at the front, so you could see it, which is funny because, I mean, most of the German military uniform had the flag on the arm, but probably not all. So anyway, it was one with a big German flag that you can also see from a distance. So German military uniform on a bike, and what he was wearing was a big helmet, a massive helmet, which had lots of LED lights, like green LED lights just running on it. So it looked like a party helmet, party gag helmet that you can put on, but it was as big as like a motorcycle helmet. And it had lots of green LEDs, and then these LEDs were running in lines back and forth. So, and then this guy, at the time I was listening to music in headphones and just trying to be in my own world, walking through London, So I had music in, so I didn't really notice what he said to me, but he actually stopped, or slowed down rather. He didn't stop. He slowed down next to me and said something to me. So it was very targeted at me, and then he cycled off. And this is the sort of bullshit whacked out theatre that MI5 put on the night before your third hearing, trying to ask for an emergency injunction against the war crimes they're committing against you, against the mutilation, the microwave irradiation. And then they mock you in this theatre. And by the way, sorry, I didn't do that before, but I should do it now at this. This is now, I'll say the same thing under oath, right? This is from according to the Oath Act 1978. This is the witness affirmation. I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I ask you to apply this to everything I've just said in this video. It's the same applies. But I'll say it again now, under oath. And this is what happened the night before my hearing. The day was the 24th of July. So before my hearing on the 25th of July, before Judge Holgate, I went for a walk at night. I left my mobile phone at home in its charger because it was, out of battery. So I was just on my own, no filming material, nothing to film with. And I just went for a walk. I had music in my ears and I was walking behind St. James's Square. And this is what happened. A big guy wearing camouflage uniform with a big German flag cycled towards me, desperately, swerved back and forth to catch my attention, had a big motorcycle-sized helmet with green LEDs running, along it, who then slowed down and said something to me that I didn't catch and frankly couldn't care, less about, and then cycled off. But it was such a spectacular thing. I mean, I know the people of London have seen it all. It's just that, again, this is just coincidence. And frankly, especially the area behind St. James's Square, I think it's like, it must be the most surveyed area, or one of the most surveyed areas in London. I mean, if MI5 are monitoring anything, that rough area should be it, right? So, there's no way that the night before you're suing MI5 and co, GCHQ and MI6, right? And you're trying to get an emergency injunction, that by coincidence, a crazy person just happens to be targeting you before they even turn around the corner on their bike, because by the time he turned around, he immediately started to catch my attention. So it was very much targeted at me. Before he turned around the corner, he knew that there's someone walking there and he should start monkeying around to catch attention. And then wearing German military uniform with a helmet that just kind of like seems to be pantomiming out mind control, brain interference, mind reading with scientific methods, maybe. So what that I took that to be, and especially after the things that happened to me, for example, these brain interferences being broadcast into my home in Switzerland, was really MI5/6 pantomiming out, screw you, you're not going to get an injunction, we're going to mutilate you even harder, we're going to continue commit crimes against humanity against you, like we commit against many other women. We don't give a shit who you are. You don't have a right to life. You don't have a right to private life or family life. We will continue doing this. And we'll put up a little happy pantomime. And we've got so many douchebags on our payroll. We'll find some dude who will climb onto a bike, climb into a German military uniform, put on a helmet like that, and pull off the show without asking us what the fuck. Hey, and we can do that because we're MI5. Wonderful. I mean, woohoo! Aren't you proud? I mean, next time you see a James Bond movie, keep it in mind that James Bond movie is like their wet dream. This is what they want to be like. But they're not. And in actual fact, it's more like a bunch of geriatric old wankers just, knocking one off, maiming and ridiculing women. Doesn't really have the same ring to it. I mean, even Hollywood would struggle to make a hero movie out of that, right? So, but this is essentially it, right? This is what I'm saying. The reality looks like this. This is what they're doing to us. I do have the scientific measurements. You've just seen. I am saying the truth. Sorry, I can show you the laptop. This software is Aronia software. They programmed it. I haven't changed it one bit. It is there. It came with this device I bought. You saw how the antenna is connected. And this is how what is happening now in my room. Okay? This is now happening in my flat. And I showed you the whistleblower who came forward about this, right? And there's another whistleblower called Karl Clark who went public in the German press in 2009. It looks like this. This is German. So in the German press, in a magazine called Raum und Zeit, and it was the edition 161 in 2009. And it says secret surveillance and radiation torture by the secret services. And it's an interview with Karl Clark, who lives in the UK and is quite public about this. And since 2009, he went public again at the Covert Harassment Conference, which you can find at the Covert Harassment Conference. I think .com website, all one word. And his profile, which looks like this, there he actually says that his marriage of 25 years was broken up or broke down because of the harassment. That he also has a skin infection that's kind of confusing doctors. So he had then made a video testimony in 2015, October 2015, where he repeated and publicly confirmed what he said in 2009. All right, so this guy with this face, yes, you can find him, get a better picture online. Again, said again what he did, what he went public with in the German press, that yes, the intelligence agencies are torturing innocent civilians with radiation and secretly surveying them. And the interesting thing is, if what you can also find there is an English translation. So if you go to Covert Harassment Conference, all one word, .com, go to Carl Clark, so click on videos, click on Carl Clark, and then the website, if you scroll down, at the very bottom, there are two links. So this is what it will look like. There will be his video testimony here, okay? Then a short bio, and then there will be two links down here, these two links. And one will be the German article, the original, link to the article, which you can also find on the website of Raumann's site. I checked, so it's genuine. And in English translation, and by the way, this is a picture of Dr. Ronnie Kilder, who was murdered with electromagnetic weapons. So it's pretty public now, you know? I mean, any child can find this online. And so what I will read out to you from that article, this is now the English translation, which should look like this. And okay, and specifically he said, here, I spied on people for long periods, this is Carl Clark confessing, eavesdropped on their conversations. I also had orders to confuse or deceive them. I would therefore secretly force my way into their homes, remove things and just move others around. I would then delete data from their computer, or I would just drive them crazy by following them and turning up close by, either in the railway station or the bus station, etc. Otherwise, I would stage a fight in the street, right in full view of the target's eyes, and many other ploys. If our orders were to put somebody under more pressure or even arrest them, I would install certain material on their computers, such as child pornography, instructions to manufacture a bomb, etc. What type of individuals were you instructed to target? People who were politically relevant. Political manipulation, hey? Likewise, people who opposed or acted against the interests of large companies, such as the pharmaceuticals. Some belonged to criminal gangs, but there were 2 or 3 targets that had nothing on them at all, as far as I could make out. Innocent people, right? How many individuals did you have under surveillance in total? In the 80s it was 5 or 6, in the 90s 7, and from 2000 to 2003 there were 3. You can appreciate from the low number of targets how intensive the targeting was. One requires at least 6 months right at the outset to accumulate as much information as possible about prospective targets' past lives. How did you acquire this information? From the garbage can, the telephone, mail, the internet. They have access to all of those, doing these sluggish things, by the way. That sort of thing has got much easier with recent advances in technology. Bugs are no longer necessary, as you can eavesdrop on mobile phones, ISDN phones, or small parabolic receiving dishes nowadays. Unfortunately, the deployment of microwave weapons has, in addition, become very practicable. And then, did you also use such weapons? No, I was responsible for surveillance. Colleagues from special departments did this. However, I was at times on site when these weapons were deployed. And can you describe in more detail how the deployment of weapons took place? It's a bit like what takes place in a science fiction movie. People can be tracked anywhere by radar, satellite, a base station, and complementary computer programs. For example, 3 radar devices would sometimes be positioned in the vicinity of the target. The radar emits electromagnetic waves, some of which pick up the target, and the result is then evaluated. My friends who work in the special department could then follow the target all day on their computers. This form of localizing the target made it easy to deploy the weapons accurately. My colleagues could see exactly where to aim and also observe how the target reacted. What effect did the weapons have on the targets? They create heat, inner burns, pain, nausea, fear. Sometimes traces are left on the skin, but mostly not. If the targets go to the doctor, they get told everything is okay. Take into account this was the situation 10 years ago, so in 2009, he's referring back to 1999. This technology has advanced considerably since then. And you know what I told you about nonlinear processes, so if it advanced between 1999 and 2009, in 10 years, then it's going to advance much quicker between 2009 and 2016, in those 7 years. So it advanced at least as much, if not more, I would say. What is the objective of such attacks? The aim is to intimidate certain people, for example, people who make a lot of noise. I myself was under attack for 3 years after opting out. I'm virtually sure that weapons were used against me in 2003 and 2004, which provoked strong aggression. I almost killed somebody on 2 occasions. Once a neighbor who was a pleasant elderly lady. So they can create not just fear, but also anger. And that's what I also observed, because they specifically, and it's interesting, isn't it, how all the whistleblowers end up breaking up their relationships. David Schuyler, Annie Mashin, Carl Clark and his wife of 25 years. They all get broken up. Because no one can withstand the actual pressure, psychopathic pressure of this, you know. And with me, I noticed that they specifically were trying to break up my marriage, because when my husband and I would have arguments, they would irradiate my head, and I certainly could feel it. At certain points, it felt like a pencil beam drilling into my head. It hurt a lot, and if I put my hand there, I could feel it. And it seemed to be just pulsing me, or just sometimes the beam following me around, trying to aggravate the argument. So the intelligence agencies actively, it's not just your right to a private life you don't have, your right to a family life is violated. And your right to life anyway, you know. So that's what I also noticed. And I find it just curious, you know, MI5, by the time, and MI6, by the time your own agent has gone public 7 years ago, pulling the mental health card at the end of October on me when I reported a microwave attack, after having gone to the High Court trying to get an injunction against you because of your microwave attack, and the judge himself having said that I come across as totally clear in the head to him. Back then he wanted to discredit the fact that I said these microwave weapons do cloud your brain, for example, paralyzing fear or anger, or but also just mental paralysis. The judge wanted to say, no, it can't be, because look, I mean, you seem perfectly fine to me. I cannot, he wanted to say, I asked for time extension, and he said, no, you can't have a time extension. You had all the time in the world. I don't believe that you had, you know, any brain interference done to you by the respondents, because you come across as totally clear in the head. By the time you have a high court judgment saying you're totally clear in the head, dear MI5, and your own whistleblower has come forward that you're doing this shit, pulling off the mental health, oh, you know, this is you've got mental health issues, really doesn't fly. It just doesn't. It's funny. You can try it, but something tells me you will embarrass yourself even more in this networked society. So anyway, so this is what Carl Clark said, right? So all these interesting things, but then he also says very interesting things about, I mean, you should read the whole thing yourself, because here he says there have already been far-reaching attempts at influencing body, mind and soul through frequencies within the framework of military research. It's possible to provoke fear, aggression, nervousness or forgetfulness in this way. In combination with other interventions, a target can be driven insane. So, for example, radio frequency can be manipulated so that the target hears his own name on the radio, or his computer shows his name time and again. By the way, this thing with the radio, I think Carl Clark got the technical details wrong, because I might be wrong, but you don't need to have fancy pants. You like modulating the radio frequency waves and beam it into people's heads. I think it's you can do that. I agree, but I think you can just manipulate the radio, put on a little tunable resistor, I think, which you can then switch to a slightly different frequency where you're just broadcasting whatever you want them to hear, like a fake radio show. And so that's what, we know from other whistleblowers that MI5 also do that, manipulate car radios and then have DJs to put on fake shows. And here, this is very interesting, because he says people are actually being driven to psychic extremes then. And Carl Clark says, yes, the undoubted goal is to have select people end up in psychiatric institutions. If a target seeks help by going to the police or to the doctor, they don't get taken seriously. Some doctors and hospitals actually work together with the secret services. Diagnostic directives permit a patient who feels persecuted or hears voices to be classified as schizophrenic. Now, I've got news for you, MI5, because someone who hears voices, by now there is a TED Talk. There is a freaking TED Talk out there, and I will look it up which one it is, where a guy, like a dude, who just put some stuff together in his garage, demonstrates how he can have this thing where it's just a big flat panel, and he can make the audience hear voices that are otherwise not audible in the room. So only the people in the cone, in the focal point of his devices, or in the rough beam line, seem to hear this. And he just waves it through the room, and you can hear the clapping start and then waves through the room as people hear whatever he's broadcasting. There's a TED Talk now. So we know the technology. It's called voice to skull. And even a dude in a garage, because this guy is not Raytheon, can put together this stuff. So I think, dear psychiatric services, your diagnostic directives are outdated. Okay? You have to take into account something called reality, which you might not have heard about. If you work with crazy people, you probably think the only thing that matters is like crazy stuff, because crazy people don't go on about reality. That's why they are crazy, right? But there is something called reality, and it keeps evolving, right? And there's new technology. You probably also don't know much about technology being a psychiatrist, but there's something called technology. You can look it up on Wikipedia, and it evolves, and new technology comes out, and there's something called voice to skull, and there are TED Talks on this. So you can make people hear voices in their heads with technology, and then they will actually hear stuff that's broadcast, not voices if you define voices to be just audio waves, but if you define voices to be electromagnetic waves as well, like what you would transmit to, say, a space station, yeah? Like, Houston, we've got a problem. That's not sound waves, because, it's kind of, the atmosphere is really rare up there. That's like first radio. And when you're listening to your radio in your car, that's also first over radio waves. So voices over radio is what they would hear. It's just that it's not going into the radio and then sound waves into their heads. It's going into their heads as radio. So these people are hearing voices that actually physically exist, because we can measure them with physical devices. So it's the laws of physics you're looking for, not the laws of psychiatry. Yeah? So, and there's also an Israeli company producing something that's, I think, called The Scream. And it's for, crowd control and protests, because in the Western world, our biggest problems are literally protests. That's why we need so many weapons to disperse protests. And this Israeli company makes the Scream, and it broadcasts straight into your head. So a journalist who's been at the protest, I think somewhere in Israel, said that when he walked away, because you have this piercing, high-pitched screech in your head, which sounds unbearable. You really think like your ears are going to pop. It's just that your ears don't hear anything, because it's not your ears. It's actually broadcast into your head. He went away, and some 400 meters, half a kilometer away, it was the same volume. He couldn't actually get it out of his head. Well, that's because it's being microwaved into your head. And by the way, I can also tell you it's not healthy. So I would really be careful buying that sort of stuff and using it on crowds, because you know, microwaving people's brains just to make them hear a really loud noise. It's like the thickest thing you can do. It's again weaponized bullshit. But okay, before I get taken out by Mossad for damaging their arms industry, I mean, you know, I'm just saying, think about it before you buy this stuff. Maybe you can just buy, maybe also from an Israeli company, really big speakers, and it would be better and cheaper. But maybe that's already damaging. Yeah, sorry, but you get my idea, right? Okay, so this is about these, you know, it's now public you're doing this. So pulling this off in Manchester at the end of October, when Dr. Katherine Horton is attending the employment tribunal of Dr. Stephen Frost. Can you tell just from the titles that we're not totally nuts in the head, right? This is why we got the little DR in front of our name, is because we're actually sharper than the average. Do you see? And yeah, people say, oh yeah, but people with PhDs can also go mad. Yeah, there's a certain probability. But what's an even bigger probability is that people with DR in front of their name are totally sharp in the head. And people working for MI5 without a DR in the head are a bit stupid. That's even more likely, I tell you. So you have this, you know, you have public admissions that this bullshit is being done. And sorry, the psychiatric services have to change their directives to take into account voice to skull. So if you're still running around with these diagnostic directives, how can you have a diagnostic directive, by the way, if you, because it sounds like you're making up your mind before you even saw the patient or the evidence. Sounds like weaponized bullshit, doesn't it? Scientifically. So you have to change these directives to take into account voice-to-skull technology as it's sold by the Israeli company, and it's been put together by this dude in his garage, who you can see on the TED Talk. So, you know, and if they can do it, then probably arms manufacturers can do it as well. So, do you know in which countries individuals are under surveillance and are being assaulted by energy weapons? And Carl Clark says the USA, Germany, China, North Korea, Russia, France and England, normally without the official knowledge of the particular government. But unofficially, I believe that government personnel must be involved in some way or know something about the goings-on. So he lists, I can also add Switzerland to that list, by the way, you know, because you've just seen this and I'm telling you. So Switzerland, Germany, England for sure. I was also microwaved in the Netherlands and in Italy and in Spain. So it's either BND or English personnel traveling there. It was actually the local team. And then again, this is like 7 years ago, okay? So since then it moved on. Why did you opt out? I saw what I was doing was wrong. Yeah, you know, clever clogs. The last two targets that were allocated to me had done nothing. They were not political, quite normal, nice people, not criminal, economically dangerous. Economically dangerous? So, if one is economically dangerous, the intelligence agencies have the right to just take you out. The only reason I could come up with for them having been selected as targets was their DNA or their blood. There's recently been a lot of research done in this area. The DNA is associated with the finest details of our character. The Human Genomes Project between 1993 and 2004 analyzed all chemical base pairs, which make up the human DNA, blah, blah, blah. Our employers were always very keen on DNA analysis of the people under surveillance. It was always one of our most important tasks in the initial period of surveillance to organize DNA or blood analyses of these individuals. Okay. So, and then he describes the attacks on him that happened subsequently after blowing the whistle. So this is all out there, okay? So Private Eye, Guardian, Telegraph, Daily Mail, Times and Independent, and all the others, you know, it's now public. And since then it has been publicly confirmed 7 years later. And also, you know, people like Dr. Ronnie Kilday have been publicly executed with this, okay? There's open admission that the you know, mental health card is being actively played, but when it's public, it's kind of like the old joke, which was old to start with, loses its appeal. And then to make it idiot proof, okay, I can put another dent into the psychiatric bullshit science, which is I wrote like a long list of FAQ, and the most important FAQ is, yes, but isn't it just paranoia or schizophrenia? Well, because these are actual real diseases, they do have a real signature, and here it is. And the real signature of the diseases of schizophrenia and paranoia is that, sorry, you can't see the thing, is that the dark thing is men, and this is women, and this is the percentage, you know, the sex ratio, if you like, for paranoia and schizophrenia. And it's, I think, 58% men and 42% women. That's what I found, and I can quote I think I do quote it here somewhere, and the actual scientific, if you Google, you will get the same study that compares all these sex ratios, all the past scientific papers in psychiatry, and comes up with this. You can find it. I now, say that if you Google, you will get through to the same scientific paper, sex ratios in schizophrenia. So there's many studies done, all coming up with slightly different answers. But they either say it's the same, or that it's more prevalent in men, like this. So the plot looks like this, if you use the scientific numbers. Now, if you go to the people who claim to be victims of electromagnetic harassment, microwave attacks, and victims who claim to be victims of the intelligence agencies, which you are trying to stamp as schizophrenic, whatever how you pronounce it, it looks like that. 70% are women. Okay? 30% men, 70% women. So this is what schizophrenia looks like if you analyze the data set. And this is what the victims who claim to be Secret Service victims look like. Can you see? Schizophrenia, this side, doesn't match that. It doesn't. Okay? End of story. End of story. And the fact that the people who are sectioning victims, women typically, because 70% are women, so the psychiatrists who section women in these numbers, I mean, if they just have one case, maybe they can't get their head around it, but the fact that the psychiatric, science, field can't work this out means that a lot of people need to be struck off, because they clearly diagnosed people with severe illnesses where another cause is actually underlying. Must be, because otherwise it would look like this. And then you can say, yes, but what if the subsample, what if all the schizophrenic women, so these here, would claim to be, predominantly claim to be microwaved, from cell tower satellites or from like a microwave weapons. And to that I can only say that women do not have this affinity for technology. So if they go randomly mad, for them to go on about really technical details that one-to-one match the advertising of arms dealers, including Aronia, by the way, which you can find on YouTube, is very unlikely. So, with that, dearest MI5, please do put this to rest, because it is just embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself, and frankly, you show that there's huge amounts of corruption going on. Okay, so we've had this now, so next time I report it to the police, if you try to section me, like use the German and Swiss Nazi laws that, if someone actually refuses treatment, you can actually just force section them and remove all their human rights. You can try this, but by now I'm in touch with enough people who, if you did try, will, create what I just described previously, these crawler bots. And you might not get, hit in the balls straight away, but by the time you will be kicked in the balls, it will be that much harder. Do you understand? I mean, again, I don't want to go through the mathematics, but the mathematics seems to show that if you try to pull bullshit in a networked society, you will be kicked in the bollocks really hard in a very ever decreasing time interval. Okay? So, fine. And then I want to go to the actual core of this, right? I mean, by the way, I got in touch with Carl Clark, and he said lots of very interesting stuff. To me, I described what happened to me, and he said, Where does it start? So, you are not at fault, and they should see from this email that you are an innocent bystander, as one would say in the matter. It can only be special branch harassing and following you. They are the middlemen between their masters, MI5, and their underlings, the Met and Thames Valley Police. By the way, Greater Manchester Police also seems to be an underling. They do the dirty work, and they are good at it. Okay, so that's one thing. In a previous email, he said, I had a lot of trouble in Germany in 2010. By the way, I was also microwaved very hard in Germany. And he says, I had a lot of trouble in Germany in 2010 while helping Dr. Hans Scheiner. He was helping targeted individuals. By the way, that's the word for victims of the intelligence agencies. After my investigation, I found out an agent from the BND had infiltrated his office and was working with MI6 from the UK in obtaining details of all those he had helped and was helping in the future. They had also bugged his office and car, and friends and colleagues' houses. They had files going back 5 years. They had got into every area of his life, and not long after I exposed everything, he died suspiciously. I know he was murdered, and I'm still looking into his and 2 others who died, Gareth Williams, the MI6 agent, and Steve Holm, a whistleblower, who I was working closely with. Bombshell, no? So you have all these bombshells going off left, right, and center, and then the only question is, given that this is happening, how the F is MI5 still having his head so far up its administrative rectum? And I think there are several reasons, and I outlined them. Number one is your heads, yeah, the heads of something or another. Sorry. The heads, sorry, it just makes me laugh. Every single time I have to say, and I'm kicking the table, sorry. Every single time I have to say military intelligence. I mean, you know, MI5 and 6 stand for Military Intelligence Sections 5 and 6. And MI6 is the Secret Intelligence Service these days, SIS. But every single time I have to say military intelligence, every time I mean, given what I know about them now, it's just so funny. Sorry, I just can't help making crap jokes. But anyway, so why is it that even though it's public, these people keep embarrassing themselves more and more and more? You know, they embarrassed themselves in my court case. It was so, actually, oh God, no, before I wrap up, I have to tell you this. I hope I've got the, well, hang on, because there's a case called Philip Kerr versus MI5. It's now in the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, and I went to the hearing and I spoke to Philip Kerr. And that was a good thing. I did. And he actually, there's a judgment you can find in the case Philip Kerr. So Kerr is Kerr. Philip Kerr versus Attorney General. And there's a judgment, February 2015, in the High Court, when his case was passed from the High Court to the IPT. And there's an actual judgment in there that you can find. You can say that and tell that I'm saying the truth. And if you Google Philip Kerr versus MI5, you'll get through to his website where he describes everything MI5 has been doing to him. And you know what? It's I talked to Philip, and amongst others, he also said, and this was confirmed, you know, this was in the court documents, confirmed by witnesses, and submitted to the court, everything. And he basically is evidence that MI5 drugged him and kidnapped him. And then also they harassed him over 13 years, and they dropped dead rats into his path, and they listened into all his conversations. They were trying to smear him with child pornography repeatedly. I mean, funny that Carl Clark says exactly that. And lots of other stuff. And then I'm in my court hearing, and I quote Philip Kerr as a reference that, yes, MI5, it's not like outlandish to claim that MI5 has been harassing you for years. I claim they've been harassing me for over 5 years now. Philip Kerr claims over 13 years, and he's got evidence for that. So I was just making this case. And then the lawyer who was representing MI5 in the IPT, in that case, Miss Aaron, was also the lawyer in my case. And then Miss Aaron and Mr. Green put together their skeleton arguments, and it's, hang on, I need to find that. It's priceless. Hang on, I do have it here. Wait, if you just bear with me for 1 second. What are the skeleton arguments? Oh, hang on. Here. I will show you the red bundle I actually gave to Private Eye, which was returned to me. Okay? So it actually on the front, it's quite interesting because here, this was my spare court bundle, so you can see it kind of looks crap, and it's, you know, a CD with lots of other evidence about other victims and lots of stuff. But this is my handwritten note to Private Eye that I wrote sitting in the offices downstairs. You know, after I just got to know from the lady closest to the window that, you know, this thing with Joe Cox, you know, and I wrote, "Dear Private Eye, I'm trying to bring attention to horrendous crimes being committed, using the fact that most do not understand this technology, nor can they believe it exists. I am a particle physicist, and after investigating corrupted systems, I'm being attacked with it too. I really need help. A careless publication would be damaging, I believe. However, there must, doubly underlined, be gradual, gentle disclosure about this, because people are being murdered with this new technology, and the police, courts and coroners are completely, doubly underlined, unprepared for this. Please call me. My mobile number, my signature." Never called. They just returned they emailed me and said, "Sorry, we can't help you," and then returned the court bundle, you know, with a little note saying thanks from Jane Mackenzie. So this is it. But what was in the court bundle is my skeleton arguments and also the respondent's skeleton arguments here. Okay, so this is skeleton arguments I'm reading out. Yeah. Can you see? Sorry. Here. Dr. Katherine Horton versus SIS MI5 GCHQ. And what's so interesting, you know, is that the same lawyer who was there when Philip Kerr had his case and therefore must have read the entire file. So Philip Kerr was drugged, kidnapped, harassed for 13 years. They tried to smear him with child pornography. Didn't work. They also, you know, he had he went out with his housekeeper to a beach in Thailand and had a photograph taken of himself on his iPhone. And the photograph was, you know, just shortly after put onto the desktop of his partner at home in Wales. So his partner just suddenly was, you know, working at the computer, and one of these Windows squares rotated to show a picture of Philip in Thailand with another woman. You know, I mean, sounds like, you know, right to private life. And by the way, Philip Kerr, they keep smearing him like, oh yeah, you know, the friend of the drug dealer. Well, frankly, if MI5 have been watching him for 13 and a half years, if he'd done anything unlawful or criminal, they could have arrested him, right? So certainly for the period that MI5 were watching him, he couldn't have committed a crime because they could have arrested him. So otherwise it would be like MI5 not really arresting him for crime, right? So you can't really smear Philip Kerr. Do you see? I mean, you know, because you guys have been watching him. So if you smear him with the crime 13 years later that he supposedly committed whilst you were watching him, you didn't do your job, right? So this is how you get yourself hogtied if you do bullshit. But what's very interesting is that the respondent, so the same lawyer who's read Philip Kerr's full file and knows about all these things, like being drugged and kidnapped and this spectacular thing, in the skeleton arguments, writes, so the applicant, that's me, refers to the case of Philip Kerr. This is presumably Philip Kerr versus Attorney General, or I can give you the reference, that's brackets, 2015, EWHC 934 QB, QB standing for Queen's Bench Division, in which Mr. Kerr also made multiple allegations of harassment by the intelligence services. In that case, Mr. Kerr also brought a claim in the High Court, which included an application for an injunction. Mr. Kerr alleged, brackets, inter alia, which is Latin for amongst others, So Mr. Kerr alleged that MI5 had trained Finches to harass him by tapping on his window, tampered with his television so it displayed only cake baking programs, moved his sofa 4 feet, and left an odd sock in his gym bag. Now, this might have been drawn up entirely by Mr. Green and Miss Aaron, it being the skeleton argument and Miss Aaron sitting behind Mr. Green. Miss Aaron might have never seen this document, even though that is like the key document that they come to court with. It's possible, but it's very unlikely. So Miss Aaron has seen this document most likely. She was at Philip Kerr, and the fact that the list of trained Finches to knock at Philip Kerr's window, tampered with his television so that displayed only cake baking programs, moved his sofa 4 feet and left an odd sock in his gym bag. Yes, Philip Kerr has listed those, but it kind of leaves out the kidnapping and drugging bit, the being harassed for 13 years, the child pornography, the fact that his relationships are being actively broken up, and really psychopathic pointless shit like his trees in front of his house being systematically killed off every single time he said, I really like that tree. And that's a beautiful tree. And then it would just die. You know how at what rates trees die. I mean, it happens, but it's rare. So a tree dies, another tree dies, and then in Wales, a tree dies again when he's referring to that tree. It sounds like it's possible, but it's very unlikely. It's much more likely. That's, again, psychopathic bullshit from MI5. So the fact that you've got these skeleton arguments and the full psychopathic bullshit imbecility of MI5 has to be, discreetly hidden behind the words inter alia. So legally this is correct. But this is the real picture where this doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. And actually Philip Kerr had the foresight to actually publish all the things that he sent to the IPT before sending them. So the entire document with the evidence and the timeline and the linked evidence has already been made public. And people have downloaded this stuff. So we know it's out there. We've seen the evidence. And we know this. And I spoke to Philip Kerr myself. And by the way, this thing about training Finches to knock on his door is just half the story. They also trained big black birds to knock at his door because that's really scary. And his partner said to me, to my face, yes, it was, horrific because it's in the middle of the night. You really want to sleep. And his partner really hasn't done anything. So why is her life being destroyed, MI5? And she says, you're trying to sleep at night and suddenly there's this bang. And, these big black birds, which, by the way, sound like ravens, make such a noise you think a grown man is about to smash in the window, which is exactly the point. But the other point is also that Philip, on his windowsill, noticed and also photographed and showed me the photograph of beak marks on the glass and claw marks on the wood, where there are just hundreds and hundreds of them. Literally. Where the bird trainers trained these birds to do exactly that beforehand, before pulling it off like half a dozen of times with Philip. But using birds that are not even indigenous to Thailand and then repeating it in Wales. So, it's really crazy, pointless, whacked out bullshit that MI5 have now proven to have done. All right? The proof is there. We know how you did it. We know that you used, finches, but also ravens, and how you trained them. Okay, it's now, and it's not about Philip Kerr's problem. I think, honest to you, was not that MI5 moved his sofa 4 feet and put an odd sock in his gym bag, and that his TV only displayed cake baking programs. Honestly, I've met Philip Kerr and he doesn't come across as that jumpy, I think if that's the only thing, like once, MI5 would have done these things once, I don't think Philip Kerr would be in the High Court suing MI5. Honestly. I don't think this is what this is about. It's not about, I can also speak about, my personal experience. If you had moved my sofa just 4 feet, and left an odd sock in my gym bag. I would have to buy a gym bag, but you know, you can put it there. And then I don't have a television, but I can buy one, and then you can show just cake baking programs. And then you can have a bunch of finches knock on my window, like once, okay? If that's the only thing you would do to me, I would laugh about it, and I would think, thank God the UK has got so much taxpayers' money that MI5 could put on a Monty Python-like show for me, for my entertainment. And I would just love the Brits even more for that amount of humor, you know? But this is not what this is actually about. And I think Miss Aaron very well knows, she must do, unless literally she got also, you know, irradiated like I was. And I was pretty like, woof, when they did that. I had to accumulate evidence at the time and actually make a court case, probably like Miss Aaron had. So if she was microwaved in the head like I was, I can understand why she didn't pick up on this. But otherwise, this sounds like a cover-up. Is that what you call it in English? Like cover-up, because you're covering things up, like real crime? Because, Miss Aaron, you know, when they stop microwaving your head, please go back and have a careful look at what you submit to the High Court. Because I might be wrong, but I think all lawyers have a duty to the court. Not to their paymasters, but to the court. And okay, maybe the court is owned by MI5, so I can see that having a duty of truth to the court might be the truth that the people who own the court want you to have. So I understand there's lots of stuff I still need to figure out. But you know, really? And then by the way, is this newsworthy? I mean, Daily Mail, I know that there's not that many teenage tits involved in this story, and I'm so sorry for that. You know, I was raking my mind before I emailed Paul Dacre how I could just put teenagers into this. And there are some teenagers, because they have gang stalked me, and they were really pretty. And I do have some evidence videos about them. So maybe I can offer those, right? I mean, photographs of really fit-looking teenage, you know, BND gang stalkers. Interest? If so, send me an email. You know, I did send you an email, so you have my email. So, you know, but otherwise, all of this looks really bad. Like, everybody looks really bad. But I wanted to explain to you how this, like, copious amount of weapons-grade bullshit can be proliferating, you know? I mean, really. And I think, number one, is that the heads of MI5 and MI6 traditionally had degrees in things like PP and history. And I think that's a big, fat problem these days. Then they do not really move with the times. Which is okay, because they're getting a bit old, so, you know, I mean, they might be on Twitter and stuff, but, you know, like, they don't really, like, breathe and feel the internet like maybe my generation, and that's okay. But then they should really retire and then, you know, do, like, other things that are not quite as devastating to national security as not understanding complex systems in a networked environment, you know, when you're the head of MI5 or 6. I mean, that kind of, like, that really kind of sucks. But, you know, then there's also something else that I came across, and I do not really want to get into the whole satanistic stuff, but I have to say that after my second time I went to the High Court, you know how I went into the private eye offices thinking, shit, last time I went to the High Court trying to defend my life and saying, please, could I possibly get an emergency injunction against these, like, raving psychopaths? I got shot in the head, and, you know, death threat, assassination attempt and stuff. So the second time I was there, I was kind of like really jumpy in the private eye offices. And then I came out of the private eye offices, and you know how this actually, I think, a cul-de-sac. And then as you come out of the private eye offices going back to the main street where you might get a taxi, there's a pub. Is still in the same street, and there were people outside drinking pints of beer. And as I came out of the pub, it just so happened that the guy detached from, you know, the tables and came with his pint towards me, big muscular guy, like kind of like the format who bit looks like Special Branch could be, right? and then came, towards me and then winked at me. Now, it could be the case that even someone with glasses, looking very much like a physicist and an academic, suddenly has this mind-blowing sex appeal just stepping through, the door of private eye. Maybe he needed glasses and he didn't actually see me for real, and he confused me with somebody. But I don't think that I had this instantaneous sex appeal that a guy from like 20 meters away has to detach from his pint and the pub to come towards me to wink at me. I don't think so. I think that's MI5 coming out saying, haha, we actually control private eye too, so there's no way you can go for help, haha. And then after this guy with special branch format winks at you, jeering, you kind of make it home. I got irradiated on the plane and I got irradiated on the bus, with microwaves, really painfully, kind of sucks. And then I come home and I recall these events, accurately. And then I discovered the next day that opposite, on a flat roof, in a block of flats opposite, which I can see from virtually every room in my house, someone put a life-size black goat onto the rooftop. Black goat, like black goats, like the ones worshipped by the Freemasons and Knights Templar, Baphomet or whatever the fuck they call it, like that sort of thing, so this like satanistic crap is like an undercurrent. And then after your third hearing, again, like there's this human sacrifice of a young woman at CERN, and you think, I'm a particle physicist and maybe I'm the only particle physicist being currently tortured to death by MI6. Maybe that's like, do they mean me? So there's this like satanistic stuff which I don't know anything about, because I don't actually have my brain whacked yet completely. So I'm more like still in the like scientist, rational, no bullshit enlightenment camp, not quite in the satanistic kiddie fucking, goat worshipping camp, which I think, as I understand, a lot of the heads of the intelligence, heads of military intelligence are. So we kind of have like communication issues. But black goats on rooftops after the last time I got a death threat, I think is a death threat. And then human sacrifice rituals after the third hearing, I can't help but take it to be a death threat. And then I'm getting like strange phone calls, like I think 3 days later, 25th of, and Dr. Ronnie killed her before she died. She said the intelligence agencies, they just love the number 3. So 3 days, every time they make announcements, like 3 days. The number 3 is really important to them. And then I'm at my third hearing on the 25th of July, and on the 28th of July, I get a phone call from a number, and where's my phone? Which sounds like a death threat. Again, because I just pick up the phone, an unknown number with +233, and I can actually, for the record, should anybody in any intelligence agency one day want to find out what the F was going on. Let me just get my mobile phone. So, I personally wouldn't really want to go on about this satanistic stuff, because it sounds like weaponized bullshit to me. It sounds like clinical psychopaths bullshitting and brainwashing really dumb people to then get them to kill for them, that's what Satanism kind of like sounds like to me. And this whole pedophilia, it very much looks like, you're meant to have a control file on you, so you're sucked into the pedophile spectacle. You have to take part, and once you've taken part, they can blackmail you. Anyway, I don't really want to get into this, but I do want to, for the record, say that, I have to just swipe for half an hour here until I get back to, the thing. And I want to say, so you do get these death threats. So you kind of like sensitive towards them. You got kind of like sensitized, to death threats. So I don't really want to go into the satanistic stuff, but I kind of have to, because it very much sounds like I'm just everywhere. I'm just surrounded. So okay, here. Oh God, my call history is actually disappearing off the record, and I can show you as long as it's still on my phone. Let me take 2 pieces of paper, cover up all the other numbers, and then hopefully show you, because it's kind of disappearing off the history. Oops. Hang on. I will do this. So it's quite amusing seeing me monkey around, right? Hang on. Oh, God. Let me swipe back down to the bottom. I will do this. So the number that I was called from, so for any intelligence agency actually want to find out who the hell it was +233 23688 4052.